I am Director Hewitt, and I will be the moderator for this meeting. Yev Malloff is our Chief Financial Officer, or the CFO, for the Regional District of Central Kootenay, and he will be presenting the budget to you. Following his presentation, we will take questions. Before we start, however, I'd like to set a few ground rules. These meetings are intended to present the proposed budget to you and to allow you the opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification, and present any concerns you may have. Our expectation is that we are having a respectful conversation about the budget. This includes allowing others to speak, remaining on topic with respect to the budget, respecting time limits that you may have been given. As moderator, I think a discussion has gone on long enough, or I think a question has already been answered, I may take the decision to move on to allow others to ask questions. Respect each other and the differing points of views that may be presented. The expectation is that we are all acting appropriately and that our conversation is respectful, including in language and tone, and that we are not targeting any one individual, but rather that we are focusing on the issues at hand. Finally, if I think that someone is not behaving appropriately or being disrespectful, then as moderator, I may ask you to leave the meeting. It is not my expectation that will come. It'll come to that, but in fairness, it is important that everyone understands the ground rules. Our intention is to have meaningful conversation about the budget in a respectful way. Yeah, we'll bring a printed copy of the script to the meeting, which you didn't, but I had it on my screen. Or did you have one?
I did. A good thing you added.
I wouldn't have remembered that. So I'll turn it over to you. Well, first, you all know, so now this is Yev Malloff. You probably all know Director Watson, our corporate officer, Catherine Alloway. She's here listening in, and we've got several members of staff on the line. So we have Joe Chirko, and I can't see who else is on down
From
there.
staff, you have your interim CAO, Linda.
Oh, that's right. We have Linda Tynan, our interim CAO for the village.
And then the rest is public and media, and you have 2 counselors.
Yep, okay. And so Councillor Bird in the room and Councillor Lang online. Thank you everyone for attending. Nice to see some people here, both in person and online. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay. So my presentation is going to be on the screen. Should we only have 3 people here, so maybe we can.
Maybe we'll open that door too.
Oh, there he is. Hi.
Yeah.
There we go.
Is it on your screen?
It
I
will.
just suggest
Oh,
doing this.
Sure.
I mean, you don't use it. Sorry, I'll watch chat.
Sure, okay.
Sound issues.
Great,
So you
thank
know when there's not.
So, yeah, is it your preference to wait to answer questions at the very end, or do you want to pick spots in your presentation where you'll entertain questions?
I'll entertain questions. It's a fairly lengthy presentation, so I'll entertain questions through the presentation, maybe at the end of the slide.
Okay.
And then I'll let people know. I'm sure there'll be people thinking ahead, and if I think the question is going to be answered, upcoming slide, I'll let people know that. Okay. So I'll just put it in presentation mode here.
So you don't have it on your computer, right? Because you can increase your own Zoom.
So over here, you could increase it on that computer. So,
For chairs, some people may not be able to, but I think I'm gonna move my chair also.
or yeah, if you move a little closer, that might be a little easier.
Close
The,
the participants window.
Sure.
yeah, and then that little, go down lower. And there's a thing to make, if you close participants.
But if I close that, that's gonna close the whole thing.
No, it should be,
You think I can, if I hit that X?
yeah, that's not leaving the
Nothing
meeting.
terrible will happen?
No, yeah, no.
At least it gives me a warning.
Okay, if you click those, on the upper right-hand corner of the presentation, there's a 2 arrows, so go down lower.
Yeah. Those things?
No,
Oh,
lower,
those.
those.
There.
Oh, so you have to close that.
Just flip that one on the left you just went towards, yeah. There you go.
You can just should be able to drag the screen over a little bit.
Ooh, look at that. That's the, oh, no, it doesn't like it. No, that was my best option.
Okay, that's a little bit.
I'd participate.
There we go. Technology.
Actually, I'll touch base with, Councillor Lang, are you able to hear us in the room?
Sally, voice
Yes, the
command.
sound is really good at this point.
Okay, great. So if you have problems at any point during the presentation, don't hesitate to speak up. And hopefully we'll hear you, or you can enter it in chat.
I'll watch chat for the.
Okay, we'll get started. And as I mentioned, it's a fairly lengthy presentation, so I'll proceed through it. I'm not going to read absolutely everything out. There's some parts have more words than we need to go through today, but I'll go through it as best as I can. This presentation will be available on the web page for this meeting either tomorrow or the day after in a PDF form. So if anybody wants to review it after that, it will be available. And not sure if everybody's aware, the draft financial plan in its entirety is on the website in the financial statements area of the website. And the financial plan that's specific to Area D in Kaslo, which is maybe only 30 pages of statements, is on the web page for this website, this meeting that we're having this evening. So there is, all the documents are available on the RDCK website. Okay, just a bit of an overview. So these public meetings, we don't make any assumptions about people's knowledge about the regional district. So we do a high level overview of the regional district and its services. We do a quick general summary outlook for the coming year. We'll talk about property assessments. That's a question area that people frequently, or residents frequently have. We'll go through a service by service discussion and then talk about some sub-regional assessments and impact. So just a little bit of a reminder preamble that the budget's still in a draft mode or situation. So the budget process started, let's say last September, October, gone through a number of iterations. And so we had a special budget meeting 2 Fridays ago at the board, and we incorporated those latest directions from the board in the budget that was published last Wednesday. So that's what this budget's based on. So there's continuing discussions going on, including committee and commission meetings. In fact, there was one this morning that will affect the budget. And there's already been changes from what I'm presenting today. I'll do my best to identify those in the discussion today. And again, and then potentially based on feedback from this meeting and what the directors take back, there's also potential changes to the budget stemming from that. A bit of a review, the budget review process. So again, it started last September, October. So staff works on putting the budget together, but it's more than just staff. It involves various committees, commissions, the board as a whole, and individual directors. So the board had 2 special budget meetings were open to the public in January and February. We talked about the core services, general admin, rural admin, building, GIS planning, 911 emergency planning. And then I'm not sure of the number, there's several dozen commissions and committees throughout the regional district that deal with parks, rec, various services, utilities, resource recovery is a really big one, which the entire region participates in, as well as transit. And then there's some local service committees, Creston and Kaslo being the two main ones, and then directors and other participants are involved in the process on an individual basis if they're the only area participating in the service. So all of this process culminates in on the March 21st open board meeting for a final review by the board and adoption by the board of the budget, which has to be submitted in its entirety to the province by March 31st. So a bit about the regional district, the services model. So there's governance and administration. So the directors and administrative staff, including finance, IT, the CAO's office, human resources that look after, and the board as well, that look after governance and administration. I'll back up a bit. The regional district has 186 services. So these 8 or so that I'm talking about here are the buckets. Resource recovery, waste, recycling, and organics, as mentioned earlier, all the entire regional district, including municipalities, participate in resource recovery services. And there's 3 subregions there, East, Central, and West. We'll focus on Central today later on because that's the area that Kaslo and Area D participate in. Recreation and parks, anything from small parks to large, are the 3 large rec facilities in Nelson, Castlegar, and Creston. Fire protection, rural fire protection, as well as partnerships with municipalities is a large part of the regional district service. And then sustainability, development, planning, and land use. Building inspection, mainly rural. We do have municipal partners participating. Water systems, and then a bunch of services to fund societies, organizations, such as libraries, communities, halls, museums, recreation, etc. So this is a map of the regional district. I'll just wait this for catch up. There it is. On the left is the map without any lines in the electoral areas. On the right shows the various electoral areas. The light green one up to the upper right is Area D, which is by area getting to be close to the largest. You know, Amy?
It is the largest.
It is the largest. There we go. So the largest area, not the largest by residents, but definitely the largest by area. And then the smaller we go, those are going to be more densely populated. So a bit of an update. So the regional district board of directors went through a strategic planning process last year and finalized a new strategic plan at the December board meeting. So that will, if it has not already, will be available on the website this week. So these are the main priorities of the strategic plan, and under each one of these priorities, there's at least half a dozen objectives. So the strategic plan helps guide the direction of the regional district and helps set priorities in relation to work plans both for staff and services and where resources are to be aligned. So 2023 in review. So we'll do a quick review of last year. So actually spending on wages, benefits, services, and most other operating expenses was significantly under budget for 2023. Wages was low because many positions remained unfilled through parts of the year. So as people leave for whatever reason to take another job or to retire, do whatever, I'll back up a bit. If people are retiring, we can generally plan for their retirement and hire and have somebody available. But if somebody leaves, positions can remain open for several months or longer while we do recruiting. So at any one time, we can have up to 10 to 20 positions unfilled for various reasons, but we have to budget for a full staffing because we've got 186 services and each service has to be budgeted on its own. And if we don't budget for full staffing, then, and nobody leaves from that position, from that service, then we may not have funding to have that service function. So that's one of the reasons why we are under budget on wages and benefits. Services when services are curtailed, projects postponed, and other staff are stretched to cover as a result of reduced staffing levels, as well as initiatives and projects don't get done. The other biggie was the utilities construction crew was disbanded in 2023 due to labor shortages. So that's one of the other reasons there was we were under budget. However, user fees and other sales of services, including building permits, were also significantly under budget. So revenues were also lower for those reasons. Capital project expenditures are under budget, mainly due to availability of resources to complete those projects. But those projects are largely the spend of those is largely offset by reduced borrowing and then transfers from reserves to fund those projects. And if there is a surplus, so last year there was surplus across various services, that's always carried forward to reduce taxation in future years. Okay, any questions so far?
You can use the raise hand function on WebEx if you have a question, or put it in chat that you have a question.
Okay, I will continue then. We're going to jump into property assessments. It's always an area that can be a little bit confusing. So hopefully we'll shed a little bit of light on it. So there were smaller increases in 2024 in most areas compared to 2023. 2024 assessments, so this year's assessments are based on the July 2023 property values. So if assessments increase, doesn't necessarily mean that taxation will go up by the same amount. No, it doesn't. I'll speak to that a little bit further. And then assessments could be divided into what we call a market and non-market change. So market change means that the current inventory of properties are worth more. This is because of sales, that real estate prices are increasing, and that drives an assessment increase. And what a non-market change means that there's been more construction activity, pardon the spelling there, and the tax base grew in numbers. So if somebody builds a new home on their property, that's considered a non-market change. That's basically new construction. So total assessment value for an area can increase either by market values going up or new construction or subdivision activity. Okay, so how are property taxes for the regional district property calculated? So we go through this, the regional district goes through this budgeting process. So each service, the taxation amounts required to fund the service are determined through this process, which is a multi-month process. And individually, I should say completely separate from that, the BC assessment, which is a provincial authority, determines the property assessments through their various calculations and methods.
Yev, can you just clarify, tax requisition for those services are determined by the cost of operations?
Cost of operations, less any other revenue.
Sorry, what I'm just saying is you didn't actually say how you determine a budget. You
Mhm.
determine the budget by determining the cost of operating that service.
Right.
And then tax requisition is determined by that. It's not tax requisition that determines. what you're
Right,
gonna give
yes.
it.
Yes. Yeah. And then for each service, for most services, a rate per thousand is calculated, which is basically the required taxes to run the service, divided by the property assessments. And once you have that rate per thousand, you can apply it for each individual property. And you'll get the property tax for that individual property for that service. That's where the big difference between regional districts and municipalities are. Municipality will have one tax rate for, say, all residential properties in that service. A regional district will have a different tax rate for each one of its services. So if somebody's looking at the budget, what we call the front cover sheets, they'll see, a list of anywhere from, 12 to 20 different services and the applicable tax rate for that service for the properties in that area. So we'll cover that off a little bit later. So the residential assessment changes 2023 to 24. So these are all the electoral areas and municipalities in the regional district. So quite a range of changes, ranging from anywhere a -2% decrease in area G to 14% increase in D. And then the split between market and non-market change. So on average, non-market change is about 1 to 2% or 1.3% of that percentage change increase. So overall average assessment change for the regional district was a 4% increase, 3 of which was market and just over 1 is non-market. So this graph, lots of bars on it, so I'll try to quickly explain it. So this is the annual assessment change percentage, and the blue bars are the 1-year percentage change. So if we look on the far left, area D, 14%, that's the change in the previous year. And then the orange bars are the 8-year average compounded change. So as you can see, if you look at 1 year, it's quite a wide range from the -2 to the +14, so about a 16% variance between the various areas and municipalities. If you look over the course of 8 years, quite a bit less variability. We're looking at from 6, we have an outlier there in Slocan, but 6 to 11%, so about a 5% average sort of variability. So over the course of time, the different areas will move at different rates. So Nelson has already seen, if you look back within the last 7 years, fairly large increases. So its orange bar is fairly high, but Nelson is not seeing the same increases. So basically, some of the rural areas and smaller municipalities have been playing catch up over the last year or two. So area D definitely, Slocan are up there, and even Kaslo is above average for the last year. Yes.
I'm just remarking on area D, that the annual assessment change from this year to the previous year. It's the only one that is significantly or higher at all from the average of the last 8 years in this graph. Isn't it true?
Yes.
One that's got a blue bar
Mm-hmm.
that is way ahead of the 8-year average.
Right. Yeah. So So catching up, I guess, would be the best way to
Oh,
put
by
it.
area D, catch it up, so.
Well, I
rapidly and not.
Or do-
yeah, it's not, I wouldn't call it catching up. It's just where people are purchasing homes at values that are much higher than the assessed value of the previous year. And so the sales in area D were 13 of 14% were market change. So that means that's property selling at much higher values than previous.
It's just remarkable that they have,
Yeah.
only one that's not.
A couple of things that I do know is occurring is area D has no zoning except for Ainsworth. And so short-term rentals, adventure tourism, business in the middle of residential areas, like we are severely behind the time when it comes to, we are attracting a lot of, there's no rules type of purchasing. We have building code and we have a floodplain management bylaw. But I do know that that's part of the impact to what's occurring is that buying a house in area D generally means you don't have as many rules as you would in an area that it's zoned and has other regulations. So it is attracting, and if you have the money, people are buying cash up front, double what it costs.
Okay. So just a repeat of the focus on Kaslo Area D. So nearly 6% increase in assessment for Kaslo and over 14 for Area D. Okay, so this is, and we'll jump over to what we call the taxation cover sheets. So these are part of the overall consolidated budget package as well as the budget package for this evening's meeting. So it basically lists so this is Area D. It lists the service on the top part of this table. It lists all the services that everybody in Area D participates in. So it's got the assessment there, and then the requisition for each service for 2024 as compared to 2023, and then the total requisition, and then also those rates per thousand. So as we look at what's really affecting it, it's basically, across the board. I mean, the largest service is the refuse disposal. So that is showing the largest total, having the largest total dollar effect on the increase of about $50,000 for Area D. But we do have several other services that are between 10 and 20. So a total taxation increase of about $118,000. But because the assessment went up, the actual rate per thousand has not increased by the same percentage.
Can I make a couple comments
Sure.
about that yet? So the biggest difference with the assessment where you'll see is some services actually have a budget that's relatively the same, but when you, like in a shared service, or let's say general admin, when Area D's assessment goes up 14%, even if that service stayed flat, our component is going to increase because we have more of the assessment we did last year than we did the previous year. So some of the increases in these shared services is directly related to that assessment jump. Because we're all sharing a piece of pie, and all of a sudden I'm taking way more of it at Area D. And so once the appeals, if anyone did appeal, which I really encourage people to do, those would be rectified, I think, in the summer. Would they not be yet?
I think sooner, well, the appeal deadline's the end of January to file your appeal. I think they try to get it in for the current taxation year.
Oh, great.
Yeah, if you haven't filed your appeal yet, it's too late for this year.
And actually further to what Amy had said about them taking a larger piece with the shared service, it tends to flip back and forth between Kaslo and Area D, having more assessment or a greater increase in assessment. It just seems year over year, 1 year it's Area D who pays more and comparatively than Kaslo does, and it switches the next year.
Last year was our turn.
The rate per thousand stays the same. So if you're in Kaslo or you're in Meadow Creek, if you're part of the Central Resource Recovery Service, you're paying the same rate per thousand as the city of Nelson for that service. It's just the amount of assessment, so the amount of value, which is what creates that calculation that shifts.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that assessment shift could be between Area D and Kaslo, or it could be between Area D and those sub-regional services like refuse disposal. So if Area D has gone up, assessment's gone up more than Nelson, EF, and Salmo, then it's going to take a greater share of the refuse disposal service.
So Rob asked about the fire service. It's in the sub-regional services. I think we'll get to those.
No, yeah, good question. So where I don't have it in this particular presentation because fire services, not everybody participates in it. So if you were to look at the service state or this statement in the consolidated package or the package for this evening, at the bottom of this service, it lists out all the services that only portions of the the electoral area participate in. So not everybody in Area D gets fire service or mosquito control or things like that. It's ranges from very small water services where you might have a few properties participating to fire protection to the library. So those that part of those services are on this page would be below what we're looking at now. And we can't average those in because that math just doesn't make sense. We can't say, oh, Area D is up. It's not really 15.69%, it's 12 because fires is down or not up as much because not everybody participates in fire. Village of Kaslo. So these are the regional district services that the Village of Kaslo participates in. And in the case of Village of Kaslo, every property in the Village of Kaslo participates in these services. So that's the entire assessment for the Village of Kaslo. And that one rate will be applied to all properties for the regional district portion of property taxes at the Village of Kaslo.
Yeah, can I just check something? Are you going to get to the sub-regional services and show charts on what that split is?
Yes, there'll be charts that show the split for sub-regional service. You mean between Kaslo and Area D, or what the different areas, sub-regions in Area D, what service they participate and what portion that service is of their property tax?
Previous presentations would just say, like, if you're in Pine Ridge, this is what you're paying for. If you're in Meadow Creek, this is what you're paying for. And fire is part of that, so you'll have that.
We'll have those
pie
charts.
Because what you see in this portion is you have Kaslo showing the fire service. You didn't have it in D because not all of it D is in it, but Kaslo is in it. But this is only the Kaslo portion. So I just wanted to see if we're going to get, the public was going to see the full numbers, which we did reduce this maybe. So
yeah, we'll look at those.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so these are the average tax requisition rates. So small decrease for Kaslo, small increase for Area D, but once again, with assessments going up, the total tax bill will be going up at a higher rate than that.
We went up a penny in Area D.
Okay. So this is the taxation change for all areas. So this is just shows so the far right shows the range of changes. So we actually have, from a minus 2.1 decrease in total taxation for an area. And again, Area D has got the highest number, largely driven by assessment change of 14.3% with a 9.35% average increase in taxation. I'm going to throw another number out. I think it's coming up Yeah, here it is. So the projected overall requisition increase for the entire regional district is 9.3. But for comparable against another calculation is to look at is actually the net average change for RDSK property owners is a 7.9% increase, because we should be subtracting the non-market change from that, if somebody's wondering how much their overall property taxes are increasing. So some of the main items in 2024, so there's a CPI or consumer price index increased on staff salaries and director stipends of 6.2%. This is basically a catch up from prior years because we use a 2-year average to do this calculation. So for directors, it's that's the calculations in bylaw from the previous board. For staff, it's part of their terms and conditions of employment. So looking back historically, the question is asked, is CPI, is that a fair and equitable method to increase salaries and stipends? So we went back 7 years, compared it to the larger public sector increases in BC. It basically equaled CPI, and somebody said, oh, go back further. So we went back to 2020, so 24 years. So basically over long periods of time, both short and long, wages in the public sector have basically matched CPI. And that's the basis for the calculation, both for staff and directors. So inflation and supply chains constraints continue to have a cost impact, with many purchases exceeding the published CPI values. So CPI is a consumer price index, but if we're going out and getting bids on construction, many industrial supplies we use, those will exceed CPI values. So those are driving increases in many areas higher than 6.2%. As well, interest rate increases are now putting pressure on both short-term and long-term borrowing costs, with a partial but not complete offset from increased investment income. And what actually does happen with the investment income, it flows into reserves, so our reserves don't fall too far behind, and are able to better able to meet future needs. And then as well, a major focus over the coming years is an asset management program. So we have an external consultant doing analysis, and we're expecting their recommendations in the coming months. We touched upon briefly before the strategic plan. So various initiatives will be, and work plans and goals will be are being tied to the strategic plan. So effectiveness and efficiency of operations, transparency, engagement with the public. I'll talk a bit about our new website, continued focus on core services, and the asset management piece.
If you want to take a break for questions.
Okay, any questions before we dive into some of the individual services?
Just with the refuse of garbage collection. Where does the revenue, is it that already? Because obviously the cost.
Right.
And
Right. So what we've talked about there is the numbers. There is the taxation amount. So the way the tax is calculated, rough and dirty, is that we figure out the cost to run the service. So, run the landfills, the transfer stations. And then we work out the tipping fees. And so if you subtract the tipping fees from the operating cost to run the service, you come up then with your taxation. But we look at both. It's sort of a balancing act to figure out do we increase taxation or do we increase tipping fees? There's benefits, there's positive and negatives to doing both. Some people may argue, well, it should be user fees, it should go up more because the more you use the service, the more you should pay. And other people will argue, well, you shouldn't make them too high because then people might do things that you want them to do, like putting their refuse where it shouldn't be going. So it's a bit of a balancing act to try keep that ratio at the right level so as to not put too much of an onus on taxpayers, and on the other hand, not to increase tipping fees by too much. So it creates what we call maybe undesirable behaviors.
Do you want some actual numbers?
It's just because it costs us what
Yeah. Mhm.
It's where's revenue and how high the revenue.
So the total cost of the service is about $8.9 million. And what we do in taxation is $3.8 million this year. So the difference is your user fees that are coming in on all those services. So it's a part of the revenue that comes into the service. And then you reduce your taxation. It's been about a 60-40 split. And so when we increase tipping fees, that's to balance out that ratio. And so it comes in as revenue. And those we've actually reduced that budget by $200,000 on the requisition end, because we closed Kokanee Recycling, and we also did something with HP Dam borrowing. I can't remember exactly. But I can get you the total revenue for 2024 budgeted total revenue is $6 million. That also includes borrowing for different things, but that's where your fees for bringing to the dump, your tipping fees would be a part of that overall revenue. And it's about a 200 line budget, but I can go through and get those actual numbers.
Yeah, and the service statement is in the package. If you wanted to look at it at sort of a medium level of detail. So it's S187 is the refuse disposal service.
And sorry, I found the actual tipping fees. So for Central Resource, we brought in 1.9 million in tipping fees.
Yeah.
And we're budgeting for 1.919. We've increased the estimated revenue coming in by about just under $8,000 for this year. And that would be the increase to $4 from $375. So that the total budget's 8.9 now. So when you look at that, the tipping fees are making a very small portion. Recycling's also in that, which we're subsidizing. So if you want to look at all the details, we can definitely go through. Yeah.
Recycling and compost.
And the composting, yeah.
Recycling and composting. Yeah, so definitely resource recovery is one of our more complicated services, and involves a lot of activity, transferring, recycling, composting, landfills. And all not only governed by the board of directors, but there's waste management plans we have to put together. So there's a lot of provincial statutes and regulations that guide our resource recovery services. Okay, so we'll jump into general administration, which is service S100. So this includes corporate admin, finance, IT, HR, CAO, municipal directors. That 6.2 wage increase we talked about. Mileage rates increased slightly. We're still catching up a little bit on some post-pandemic training opportunities. So there's a fair increase in IT costs for a couple of reasons. One is the moving to Microsoft 365. And so the regional district has been using Office 2016 for the last 8 years, and Microsoft basically said, we're no longer going to support that, so you're moving to 365. So we're going through that transition right now. So the annual licensing cost of that's going to be increase our costs somewhere between $200,000 to $250,000 a year, plus the implementation costs. And many of our other software licenses we're basically a taker and not really in a position to negotiate. They come out. So if we have some system software to run our systems, they'll say, here's our new price, and all our customers get this price. So this is what you have to take. So IT costs are up a fair bit because of that, including cybersecurity, as those risks continue to grow. In December of this year, when we launched the new website, the board approved an additional $70,000 to complete the new website. So we've gone out to requests for proposals. I believe those have recently closed. So hopefully by the end of this year, the plan is to have a new, more user-friendly website available. And so overall, the year-over-year taxation increase is 11% in this service. So everybody across the regional district, including all municipalities, participate in general admin. So S101 is rural admin. So Kaslo is not part of this. It's all the rural areas. So this is rural director expenses, fire services overhead, and bylaw services. So the same CPI increase. There's a large $474,000 fire training grant to support wages, equipment, and other training costs for our firefighters. So overall, 15% increase in requisition, mainly driven by a full staffing complement in bylaw and fire services, as well as the wage increase. And it includes $75,000 for fire services command unit to be funded from reserves. We'll go through some of the other services. So Kaslo and Area D, building inspection. So permit revenues definitely softened from the peak years 21, 22, with some lower construction values. Although there's a small increase in number of permits compared to last year. So there's been an update to the bylaw fees and charges, and hiring of new staff and supporting customer service and improvements to permit processing times. So there's been a fair bit of turnover in building inspection over the last couple of years. Which has impacted service delivery. So the department, I believe now is fully staffed. So the question might be, well, why don't you, if building permits are off and the revenue is not the same, why don't you lay off some staff? Well, the way building construction works, somebody applies for a permit, it might take them a year or two or more to complete their construction. So our building staff are currently out, and this year and next year are going to be completing the inspections of the projects that we've already received revenue for. So in building permits, we also run a stabilization reserve to stabilize some of those revenues. So we've taken that into consideration this year to help reduce taxation in 2024. Planning operations are stable on budgets. So we're looking at the new provincial, implementing the provincial legislation to housing regulations, some assessments and some various projects there, including a housing needs assessment, watercourse wildfire development, and review and revise floodplain bylaw.
Yeah, just for your knowledge, watercourse and wildfire DPAs are long done.
Are they? Okay. All right. I will speak to the person who put that in here. Okay, GIS, slight decrease in taxation. Operations are stable, and looking for opportunities to advance technology. And Cable-I's previously discovered data assets, local conservation fund, expanded last year to include Area F, and $130,000 was awarded for 8 projects in 2020.
Can we just note that GIS is a good example of where assessment is driving? It's a small increase for D. It's one of the smaller ones, but so the budget went down overall. The rate per thousand went down by a penny, but Area D's portion went up by almost $1,000. And that's just where you see that assessment. I mean, this is a really small impact. The resource recovery would be a bigger one. But it's a good one to show when a budget goes down and you get that shift in assessment, you can still see an increase. Correct me if I'm wrong, yeah.
No, that's, thank you, Amy, for pointing that out. Community sustainability, just checking here. Yes, so both Kaslo and Area D participate in the service. So a number of projects relating to protection of drinking water and watersheds, and initiatives, as well as the climate action plan, which is being redrafted to incorporate the engagement feedback that's been taking place over the last year. And including a couple other initiatives there. Continue on, so food and agriculture, and as well as some energy related projects. Emergency management, I won't read this all out, but it basically, if you know, one of the main items that's coming out this year is the province has brought forward a new Emergency Disaster Management Act. So there's a fair amount of planning and coordination and that will need to come from to comply with that act, as well as updating bylaw policies, procedure documents. We actually don't have the full information available to know the timing and the scope of work to that, but we're doing some preemptive planning around it. So continuing the neighborhood emergency preparedness program, ongoing fire smart programs, and wildfire resilience plans.
Pause for question.
Any questions on that one? Okay, we'll jump back to central resource recovery, which is basically the waste recycling organics. So this, again, 3 subregions, East, Central, and West. So Kaslo and D are part of Central, with Nelson, E, F, G, and Salmo. So equal taxation and tipping free increases. So we are still dealing with the HB Mines tailings facility and post-remediation work there. The West compost facility operations began in the Central/West began in Q3 of 2023. So the way that helps the region as a whole is it extends the life of the landfill in Wishenya, where most of the waste in the regional district goes. So it not only extends the life of it, it also reduces various greenhouse and other gas emissions from that landfill to not have the compost as part of that landfill. So a few other projects, some repairs to transfer stations, some equipment, and another biggie that's coming up is these legacy landfill assessments. So there's a bunch of landfills that used to exist 40, 50, or 60 years ago that some even predate the regional district. So the regional district is responsible for some assessments on those, which may drive some future work. So that is yet to be determined. So we're going to start some of those assessments this year. And then other ongoing regular assessments, including hydrogeological and some piloting some new septic management options. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It says Kaslo and Area B, as if all of Kaslo and Area B share in the services below, but it's not quite right, is that?
So all of these items, initiatives, and projects are all part of central resource recovery. So area Kaslo and D may not directly benefit from some of these, but all of these initiatives and projects are part of running the resource recovery department for the entire subregion.
Well,
Yeah.
there's three subregions. You have west, central, and east. We don't have landfills in central resource anymore, so we only have transfer stations. Our landfill is Vitashania. So when we do landfill liabilities and do any upgrades to those, that is where our garbage is. So our direct service is the Kaslo transfer station, also called a dump, but it's not really a dump, it's a transfer station. And so there's same with the organics, where that program is in Selmo. It builds the capacity to be able to process organics that if Kaslo and D want to do anything, we now have the kind of backbone system in place. And then it also reduces the waste that is actually going into the landfill, which will reduce our liabilities overall. And so for Central, the shared service, it's not a Kaslo and D shared service. It's between Selmo all the way up to Gerard. So it's kind of like the middle of the Central Kootenay RDCK is that service. So we're all in it. But like Slocan is in the West Resource Service area, Creston's in the East. And so they'll have different considerations. Creston has a landfill as well, whereas we only have the one between the two, Central and West. So we share it.
Yeah, so the model, this is one of the services that's across the entire, resource recovery covers the entire regional district. So if in the sub-region, like these legacy landfills, you might go, oh, that legacy landfill, that's across the lake, why am I paying for it? But this is one of those mandated services by the provincial government. So the model is that everybody in a sub-region shares these costs across the sub-region, even though that landfill might be 150 kilometers away, or that legacy landfill is not near your area. So a little bit about parks and recreation. So this service covers Glacier Park operations, Ainsworth Wharf, and as well grants to Kaslo Arena, Curling Club, and Parks. So the Area D Community Works grants committed to funding improvements to Glacier, Ainsworth, and Lardo regional parks. So some work initiatives for slated for 2024 there, specifically Glacier Creek, Lardo Regional Park, and Ainsworth Wharf.
Can we just talk about some of those changes?
Yes, so this note, I think, talks about them in total, but if you want to speak to them?
Sorry, I got kicked out of WebEx, so I got off the presentation. Keep going, and then just before we leave parks, if we can talk about what the projects are.
Sure. So, so at the North Kootenay Lake Services Committee meeting this morning, so really hot off the presses, $20,000 in reductions to tax requisitions were identified, and so that will be reflected in the final draft budget that will be presented to the board on March 21st.
So the projects I wanted to mention in terms of the individual parks is for Glacier Creek, it won't be this year, it'll be next year. See, Joe's on the line, so he can also correct me, and Susan has a really good memory too. So for Glacier Creek, one of the biggest projects, which we will be using the capital reserve for, is quite a few years ago, we did a fuel prescription. So it's looking at wildfire mitigation on the park. And in that fuel prescription, what was identified is an emergency exit route, because there isn't a very good one for Glacier Creek. Unfortunately, we wrote the prescription, but the actual funding to apply to do the work then changed, and Glacier Creek was not identified as a high enough priority for the province because there's not enough people there. So we'll be pulling from capital reserves to build that egress kind of emergency exit route, which is also part of the mitigation work. And then for Lardo Regional, I think it's pretty minimal. We have a bathroom there now, and there's some work going on the foreshore. Ainsworth Wharf has a long-standing upgrade required for the wharf that would make it more accessible. And wharfs and the foreshore and the regulations have changed significantly. So there's a lot of work to do on that one. It's not as simple as just pouring some concrete anymore. And so those are kind of the rough idea of what's happening in each park. But we're not using requisition for any of them. We are using the capital reserve for them.
Right. Thank you, Amy. And part of the capital reserve for that Glacier Creek road construction that'll be coming up next year comes from the Growing Communities Fund, where the province allocated each municipality and regional districts a sum of funds. So the regional district received $4 million roughly, and don't quote me on this, but $98,000 of that will be going towards that Glacier Creek road construction, which is currently now sitting in reserves.
Yes, sorry, I forgot that.
Okay. Just a little bit of parks. This is a graph that shows the growth in parks in the regional district, basically some large increases, and just shows the increase in the also in the effort and resources required to manage the parks. So we'll talk a bit about water utilities. So Woodbury's got a proposed 4% user fee increase. So some water quality upgrades being finalized. McDonald Creek requisition and parcel tax in the service, so no increase in 2024.
Yeah, and should actually only be it's canceled.
Right.
Yeah. And just to reference Woodbury, because there's actually been a lot of work that's happened there in the past few years. So we did about a $500,000 water quality upgrade that was 100% grant funded. As comparison, the requisition that comes in for that service on an annual basis, I believe, is under $50,000. So we also have with asset management planning, which basically says, here's your asset, and this is how much money you need to put aside every year to be prepared for upgrades and emergencies. We were able to pull from our reserves, which are not quite good, but we've been putting into reserves in that service for quite some time. We were able to pull from the reserves to also deal with a water line that was unknown on a private property that needed to be moved ASAP. It was not moved ASAP because it takes a year of budgeting and contracting to be able to do that. The other thing coming up for Woodbury that will, once we get a final idea on the costing and the proposal, the community, which has a very active fire smart committee, they are in a response only service. They don't have full fire response. The very active fire smart committee, they are looking at hydrants being installed. So currently the projected cost is about $60,000 for 5 in total, and we would have enough in reserves to do that, but we will not be moving forward until we fully understand the scope of it and have both fire services, which respond to Woodbury, and a fire, which is Kaslo and Balfour. Both those chiefs need to be involved. So there'll be some on-site investigation into the potential of those hydrants and where they might be located and who's accessing them. The interesting thing when you have a fire service and water service and you're not in a municipality where you have one entity operating all, is we have a response service for fire and then a water utility putting hydrants in. So you have a lot of different siloed services, which can mean it takes a lot longer to get things done because you got to plan between the services. It also means you get to know to the penny what you're paying for it. So there's a lot of work coming up for Woodbury. And yeah, McDonald Creek is, we still own the asset. We contract to you guys.
We own the water treatment plant. We're the purveyors of the water. You own
Yes.
pipes in the ground.
Yes. And so what we do for requisitions in that service goes 100% to the reserves, which can be used for capital. And we will be looking at that contract is up, I think, in 2024. So it's on the document.
By 25. Yeah.
So Kaslo operates that service. And so you have a different bill from Kaslo for that service for the operations.
Thank you. So fire services, so for Kaslo S280, so that's shared with Kaslo and defined portion of Area D. So the draft budget shows a $43,000 increase, primarily driven by increased salaries and benefits. And so that'll be reduced to $18,000 in the final budget due to a $25,000 grant from Area D towards the $110,000 purchase of a truck. And the fire services, the Ainsworth Woodbury response S278 shows a $4,000 tax requisition increase in 2024. Is there anything you wanted to add, Amy, or?
Yeah, on the, for staffing, a large part of that increase is because we've gone with a full-time fire chief. It was too large a job to expect a volunteer or a semi-volunteer to do it, so we were successful in hiring one who started just under a week ago. We started last Wednesday.
So when we went to a full-time fire chief, we've actually slowly increased that line item in the last 2 or 3 years, anticipating a full FTE. So it wasn't such a jump when we did that. We've also increased, and part of some of the numbers floating out there about increase the salary and the numbers on employees, it's that we also started providing, I believe it's a stipend, it's not a salary, to the firefighters themselves, which changed them from a volunteer to staffing. And so those were also some of the increases in this service. Essentially, our firefighters are working very risky, high valued, need a lot of education. Retention and recruitment is very difficult for all those reasons. And so Mayor Hewitt and I agreed quite a few years ago that we need to figure out how to actually reimburse for what people are committing to by joining the fire service.
Thank you. And yeah, so that's the regional district is moving towards a common and consistent payment model for firefighters. I mean, they're still considered volunteers, but they do get basically a payment for each hour of training and for being on call. Being called out to attend, whether it's a vehicle accident or a fire or wherever else they're called out. So the rates are still fairly low. I think we're talking $17 to $20 an hour, basically just at minimum wage or above minimum wage, basically whether you want to call it stipend or honorarium. But that's the volunteer model of years ago is basically no longer exists much throughout the province. Firefighters are paid at least some minimal amount for the actual work and training that they do. So emergency 911 service. So the regional district manages the 911 service for most of the regional district except the larger municipalities. So it's seeing an increase in taxation of about $43,000 as cost increase and revenues decrease. So most of the increase is driven by the services cost for 911 dispatch. So there's 2 dispatches. So when you phone 911, you phone the South Okanagan 911 Dispatch Center. So their annual contract has increased from $80,000 to $115,000. And if the call goes to fire dispatch, which the regional district of Fraser Fort George looks after, that cost has increased by about $24,000. So those are the 2 dispatch services that have seen relatively high increases in the coming year as well as the previous years. So they're driving much of that increase. Some information management software we're looking at, and then $45,000 for GIS services to integrate this next gen 911. But I believe most of that will be funded by grants. That last item.
So to speak to the decrease in the amount to 911, it's because it's only on landlines, and as people are moving away from landlines, and there is no levy on the cell service. So most households have 2 or 3 cell phones, and they're not paying into the 911, but that's where most calls are now originating. for 911. You're out and about and you see something happening, so, it's gonna continue to increase the 911 budget for us. Because we have to supply that service.
And we have been advocating to see those levies be placed on cell phones as well, but not to any success. You have someone unmuted, so I don't know if they have a question.
Are there any questions from anyone online? All right, we'll keep going. Thank you.
And then transit, will actually see a decrease in requisitions, due to use of reserves. There's a fairly large reserve in transit that's been built up, so we're using that to smooth some of the increases in tax requisitions.
Sorry, Yev, on that one, it was $100,000 we were using from reserves to decrease that service.
Yeah, so 100,000 was used to decrease it by 35 compared to the previous year.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, so here's our pie charts that Amy was asking about.
I like my turn.
So the first one is for a resident of Kaslo, so in the municipal area. So the dollars on the left-hand side are per $250,000 of home value. So we chose that because then you can multiply it out. If you're in a $500,000 home, you double it, 750, triple it, etc. So it shows basically a flat tax bill based on the numbers we currently have. And part of that is driven because of that assessment shift from Area D, from Kaslo to Area D. So this year, as we've talked about, Area D is going to take a greater share of their shared services. And so the residents of Kaslo, the municipal area, won't see potentially see a small decrease. So the services that the residents of Kaslo pay them, the largest service they pay into is the fire protection, the refuse disposal, the library, and then the community facilities. So that is probably 85% of the services that residents of the RDCK bill that the residents of Kaslo pay into, or the property owners.
Can I just make sure, for community recreation, we talked about parks, but that service, which is about $250,000 a year, maybe a little more, provides contribution grants, operational grants to Lardo Valley Hall, Argenta Hall, Johnson's Landing Hall, Ainsworth Hall, the Kaslo Arena, and the Kaslo Curling Rink, plus the 3 parks. So there's quite a bit in that service. We don't own and operate the halls, which is significantly cheaper in terms of the tax use. But Lardo Valley Hall is the biggest piece of that one at about $40,000 annually. And it's a big hall. And the arena is about $56,000 this year, plus $10,000 to the reserve for that facility.
Yeah, 10,000 to the curling club, and also the rate that we're paying for the arena. That's because it's run by a volunteer organization. We're very unusual in that. And that's the only thing that keeps that arena viable, in my opinion. If we tried to make it a municipal asset, it's a municipal asset, but run by the municipality, it would cease to exist.
The Kaslo Comparative does operate their arena, and when I looked at their operations budget a couple of years ago, it was more than our total recreation budget. It was about $300,000 to run that arena, and it's similar in comparative size. So
Okay, so the next, we're going to go through some of the areas inside of Area D and look at what a potential tax bill might look like. So the Meadow Creek area we have mosquito control, the largest portion of their taxes, and with refuse and those community facilities making up the three of them about 75% of the tax bill.
You have discretionary grants on here, but that's at 0 this year. And EDC is also at 0.
Okay, sure.
This didn't translate through into these charts because it was indicated at 0 on the sheet.
Okay. We see zero, discretionary for area D, 0.
And for mosquito control, anyone on the line from Meadow Creek, I will be reducing that. I subsidize it with a grant every year. Last year it was 40,000. The total cost of the service is 110 to 120. We tax about it's 70,000 from 2023. The proposed budget this year is 74, and so the difference is always a grant. But I'm going to be reducing that even a little more and increasing the grant that I put into that service. So not a lot of grants available from Area D this year because a lot of them will be used for things like this. But it is, if you look at that rate per thousand, it doesn't have it, just has the individual rate. It's one of the highest rate per thousand services. We have a lot of land, not a lot of people. So that mosquito service is very expensive. They are going to be looking at, and hopefully this year they can, moving from helicopters for aerial applications to using drones. The helicopters are the biggest hit to the budget. And depending on the time of year, you often can't get them because it's fire season. So drones are very, very specific to the site and they can be operated manually from the ground. So they've got all their licensing and hopefully they'll switch over this year and see those aerial expenses go down. Don't see any hands up online or nothing in chat.
Okay, so our next area will be Pine Ridge. So this one has a little bit wider spread among services, but again, refuse, the community facilities, and mosquito control making up those three about 60% of it. Any comments about this one, Amy?
Well, discretionary grants remains at 0, but I think it just got carried forward by accident. Same with EDC, it's at 0. Only thing in this one, the Pine Ridge cost of that contract actually did not change at all this year. So there's no increase to that service. And it's not a shared service. So it's just a very small part of Pine Ridge or a very small part of Area D. And the only other thing I noticed we didn't mention, but we mentioned it with fire service, our Jaws of Life is our actual road rescue service, and that's search and rescue here. So when they get called out for a vehicle extrication, they get reimbursed through EMBC, I believe, not through taxes. I'm looking at one of our search and rescue members. Yeah, so they are our road rescue. It's not our fire service that does road rescue.
That you were here.
And all volunteers. We are advocating that you guys get the same rate from the OFC that the firefighters get for cleaning.
Yeah.
You don't, no. And your budget, the requisition for Jaws of Life, search and rescue that we provided in requisition is I think about 25,000 average. 25 to 27, but the actual operation budget for search and rescue is closer to 190. So a very small part of their budget and another significant, completely volunteer driven managed organization.
Okay, so next we have some new Area D that's got, doesn't have the mosquito service, doesn't mean they don't have mosquitoes. And doesn't have the fire, which is usually a large portion. So again, refuse, community facilities making up a good chunk, and then general and rural admin as well. But as you can see, the tax bill per 250 is relatively low compared to the areas that do have fire service.
I think that home value will need to change for next year. I don't know any home worth 250 around here.
Yeah.
Can't even get land for that, but
And so next is Area D, Ainsworth, so where there's a fire protection. So again, fire protection, community facilities and refuse making up about 60% of the bill, and the bill per 250 higher than the last slide, but less than some of the other ones. And so this is somebody in Area D that lives close to Kaslo and gets fire protection from the Kaslo service. So you can see the fire protection making up close to 40% of their tax bill, and you can see the tax bill is quite per $250,000 of value is substantially higher than somebody who doesn't have fire service. And again, Comrec and refuse making up the other large share of it.
I think one of the things in this one is that you can't do it because it's only Pine Ridge, but the further addition to this is if you're in Pine Ridge, you have all of this, plus the mosquito service, which for Pine Ridge is only $11,000 a year. It's about $12,000 now for that service. But because there's so little participants, it does make out to be a high rate per thousand. So you would just add the Pine Ridge mosquito service to that pie chart if you're in Pine Ridge.
And that's it.
Great, well, thank you, Yev. Are there any other questions from anyone online? Oh, there's, well, they can unmute. You have questions, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. What about in the room? Do anyone else have questions?
Oh, okay.
Any questions from the Valley boards, or was there somebody online?
No,
Yeah,
Mary,
go ahead, Rob.
not a question, just congratulations on a job well done. A lot of positive information came out of that presentation compared to previous years. So I think it's a message that will, when it's transmitted out to the community, will be well received. So thanks for a great job.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Over the last couple of meetings that we had, Director Watts and I have been working on reducing where we could. Council usually gets a $10,000 amount for recreation grants, but because we, after a couple of years of reduced activity due to COVID, we had enough in our surplus to fund this year, so we reduced that, and there were other items. While we didn't do any requisition for economic development this year, again, because we didn't have any projects in the queue, so we couldn't justify taxation when we didn't, just in case we came up with something. We've got a little bit of money. If we decide to pursue a project, we might be able to use that money for matching grants. And then the work that was done this morning at our shared services meeting reduced it a little bit further, and we'll see how that plays into the final numbers once that's all taken into consideration. But we're doing what we can because we recognize that it's not a good year for people. It's never a good year to have increased taxation, but it is, every costs are going up regardless of what we do. Costs are just generally going up, and we recognize that, and we're trying to do what we can on this budget. Erica?
Question, probably not anyone here could probably answer. So if I have a house in area D and I can see by looking at my assessment this year compared to the previous and right under what they send you, it'll tell you that you had a 40% increase in value compared to the previous years. But let's say running down the road puts in kids and he's actually got like a 2% increase in value. So when we're looking at those, when you were saying per 250,000, how much you would expect for your, does the rate of increase in value affect it or simply the bottom line of how much your property is worth? For my taxes, like am I gonna look at a greater increase in?
Yes.
Because my assessment went up?
Yeah, if you're,
Than
your neighbor, yeah. So if your assessment went up by 14%, then, and theirs went up by 2, you'll have 12% greater increase in taxation in your tax bill than they would as a percentage.
They actually might have a decrease because if the average is, let's say, a 10% increase and you're at 14, you know your tax bill is going to go up. Somebody who's had a reduction in their, and some people have reductions in their assessment, or it's lower than average, then it's probably going to be lower.
Their tax bill will be lower than.
Potentially, it depends what's happened with taxation as a whole. So if you look at those figures, dollars per 250, most of them didn't show a big increase and some of them are the same. So if the dollars per $250,000 of value are the same, that means anybody who's got a 0% or higher increase is, 1% or higher increase in assessment will have an increase in their taxation. But where it could be different, somebody could show a decrease if their that rate per thousand has gone down. So somebody can have a decrease and somebody else in the same area might have an increase. So your assessment change is not only compared to your neighboring municipalities, it's compared to your neighbors as well.
So Erica, if you look at the financial plan, you can see in this column, you'll see the rate per thousand. And a lot of these went down in area D, the rate per thousand, because what occurred is you added value. So it reduces the individual cost. But what occurs is that if that's all the same houses, so that house is worth more. So even though the rate per thousand has gone down, they're still picking up a bigger chunk of it because they're valued at more. But if it's a non-market change, like you build a new house, then that rate per thousand going down because you have more value available is actually your neighbor picking up the difference. So there's a lot of variables. What you can do, as of March, our board meeting, you can look at the rate per thousand that was approved, which would be everyone in area D would have this one here. And then any other services you might participate in, depending on where you live, you can add in that rate per thousand times by your assessment. You'll know exactly what your tax bill is going to be. And so there's just a lot of variables depending on what caused that assessment shift. And then what did the budget come out on? So as the rate per thousand goes down, it doesn't always mean that what you're paying is going to go down, because if it's an increase in your property value, it could be a lower rate per thousand, but you're a higher value. So my house went up, I think 14% this year for Kaslo, which is significantly high. That's what I get for residing and putting insulation on, but okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean my taxes are going to go up 14%. It depends on everyone else's assessment in that area, because I can already look and see that Kaslo was predominantly market change again, not non-market change. That means it is property values increasing more so than there's new houses participating. I always look at it, it's kind of why I like pie charts, because I think of it as sharing a pizza, and you can either cut 8 pieces or 16 pieces, depending on how many people are participating. And when you add people, you need smaller pieces, but eventually you're going to need more pizza.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps. I've used a lot of analogies over the years because it's not a straight percentage, which would be easy. we can't do that at a regional district. We have to go by service and you can't move money between services. So it does make it a lot more complicated. It's also, for me to understand, a lot more transparent because I can tell you this is what fire is costing you. This is what's happening in your mosquito service.
Yeah.
But it makes understanding it more complicated.
Thank you, my mind's boggled.
Yeah. That's there. Okay.
Yeah, this was our final budget document from last year. We get one of those at the end of each year. And what I do for council is I pull out our cover sheet and they cover the sheets for any of the services that we actually pay into. You don't need to see all of them. Well, you could see all of them, but I'm not gonna do scan it.
One of the interesting things to look at is like, so out of 186 services, if you live in area D, you're paying for 17 of those services out of 186. And then depending on where you are in area D, you're adding a few others. At max 24, but that's impossible because you'd have 2 fire services and 2 water services if that was the case.
And what about if you're in Kaslo?
So if you're in Kaslo, you are paying, I think it was 12 services last I checked. Yes, you're just across the road from D.
13.
There you go. And so when you look at that, so you can do the same thing. You can go through each.
Yes.
Yes.
So then you've got to add the municipal, the school, the hospital. Yeah, all those other things. So.
Yeah.
Too many rules and regulations. Drain was just a bunch of paths which is for rural area. Now we have drains, we can go to water, qualified by that day because we drain to that level. We have one house by every 2 years.
Right.
So, but you have to, that's what kills the water, yes, it's so
Yeah.
much draining. And that's why, what was we.
It's
But I love volunteer. Yeah, search and rescue, full hard on,
Mhm.
without money, without pay. But the training is a little bit less, and that's what needs to change.
It's definitely, every time we get to meet with the Office of the Fire Commissioner, we have challenged them so hard. Unfortunately, municipal directors don't always get included because our advocacy piece is generally rural directors. And the Fire Safety Act has been a big topic for the last 4 or 5 years, one of the many acts they've been updating that they've yet to do, thank God, because what they want to do is not going to work. But when it comes to, when we've actually said to them, so what do you do when you can't meet these new regulations? Like the playbook of 2016 really changed everything.
Yeah.
They essentially said to us, well, then shut down your services. Which if you have no fire service, talk to someone trying to get insurance in Johnson's Landing, which has compounding issues. Talk to someone in Meadow Creek about it. And I would love to tell them you need to have rural applicable regulations that are not designed on living in downtown Vancouver. It is never like, pick any service you want to talk about. They can never, recycling. They have no concept of, when we talked to the Office of the Fire Commissioner, they didn't even know that most of our areas don't have fire services. If you look at Area D, about 20% of it has fire service. The rest of it will never have a fire service because not only building the hall and keeping up all the equipment and all the training, it's impossible with geographically sparse communities. So what does that mean? They don't have fire services. Who's picking up that difference? It's all the S100 training folks. And so there's a huge gap, and I just really need to acknowledge, like, that is huge for you to have participated, and I totally get why people.
I love it, but it's just.
Yeah.
I had put my training and you made it thing, so you have to do it all again.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. I'm so sorry.
It's-
It-
I paid.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice meeting you.
Seniors advocate.
No, she had another meeting. That
Sounds
was
like what you said about
the rural.
4%, 80 to 86% of the population pieces live in rural. The other 14% of it.
It's really crazy. Yeah, that's from your. Not together, but Susan did tell me.
I did though, note, and you'll see it in my supplementary report. I usually don't do that. It's quite long. But there were 7 recommendations, and the last one I think is the most important, asking the province to have a rural specific portfolio. Because we get lost, right? Because everything is
Yeah. decided
decided by the urbanites. She was very adamant about that. Unfortunately, she's on her.
Anyway, thanks again.
Okay, thank you as well for coming. Can we close the meeting?
Yeah, I've turned off my chat. Any other questions
I
before
don't
we
see
close the
anybody
meeting?
chat, but
I don't see any.
All right, well, thank you everyone for participating. Who's left online?
Okay, have a nice evening, everyone.
Farewell.